Okay, Ford haul truck. Let me just shoot these shots as kind of the intro to part 34. The last video, part 33, I kind of explained about that removable floor pan in the cab area and me getting it bolted down, and the dog coop and the material that I had gotten for it. This chapter is going to be about some building that dog coop or that dog house around that engine block, and some of the things that I had to do or did with it. But towards the end of this video, or at the end of this video, there is going to be some fairly big news about this build. No, let me just leave it at that. At the end of this video, there is going to be some fairly big news about this build. Okay, so what I did is I cut out a piece of sheet metal and just kind of formed it at right angles to create the basic design of that doghouse. Now, some of you might think why I cut it at right angles, came out straight like this. Well, there's actually two reasons for it. To provide more clearance to be able to possibly get the valve covers and head bolts out of the engine. In other words, a straight shot up instead of curving it up like I could have. That wouldn't have allowed me to probably get those head bolts out of there. So I did it at the right angle. Now, again, I paused because I'm thinking at the same time that I'm talking to you. The only issue that I see, what I'll have to do is redirect that heater vent because it blows directly down onto the top of that. Now, yeah, this one comes out this way, but that one comes out directly down, so I'll probably have to redirect that. Put a little, maybe a baffle in there or something like that to get it to redirect. But okay, so this side, which is unimpeded by what's going to be over there, and I'll take you over there and show you that in a minute. This side I can probably form kind of straight off, come down here, but let me shut you off, take you over to the other side. Okay, over here at the other side, as you can see, I'm going to have to kind of form it around where that head protrudes out. So probably what I'm going to come out and roll it over to meet that over there. But that will come with some thought. There's a couple of things. This bracket that I made to pick up the engine or head, actually the head won't be there, so there will be nothing on top of this head right here. The intake manifold doesn't start until back here, and I'm not really even sure you can see that. Hang on, let me show you. Let me get the light over here. Okay, hopefully you can see now. So this bracket won't be there, and the intake manifold doesn't start until over in here. So I can kind of form this, hopefully, up and around to keep as much unobstructed space there as I can. Because someplace in there I've got to get that gas pedal. So what I did is I formed this side up so that I've got this side up. What I think I'm going to do is rivet it on. I'm not going to weld it. I'm just going to rivet this side piece to the main piece. Because I think the overall thing is going to be screwed. What I'll do is I'll screw it into the firewall up there and screw it down onto this so that actually the whole piece, that dog coop type of thing, can come out as one piece after you unscrew it from the firewall in this original transmission access plate. I'm going to leave that screwed down also, but I will screw it to that so that it can come off all together or come off individually. One of the things that I did is I went out this morning and bought a Rivet Gun. It's an arrow. I'm not promoting it. I mean, I've used it. Works great, but again, there's probably other manufacturers that provide one that's just as good. One of the things that I did is most rivets that you find in a supply store are aluminum, so I didn't want to put aluminum rivets into steel and get that reaction between the steel and the aluminum rivet, which would probably deteriorate the rivet within a matter or a short time. So what I did is I got some steel rivets and I'm putting it in there. So I did the riveted the dog coop on the side of the dog coop on, and kind of sits like that actually, so that you get it. And what I'm doing is filling this hole in. This is where the original shifter was. This is that removable floor pan that was in the truck to begin with, where the shifter, the brake lever. Now I'm going to leave that hole for the brake lever in there because at some point in time I'm probably going to try and reuse that. I kind of like that old school style of brake lever, but I just kind of wanted to show you that it's kind of what I'm doing is just putting them in. I put those 4 rivets in through the original screw holes that held the boot on to the cover plate. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put 2 over on the side just to give it a little more support. But anyways, there it is. Okay, this camera might be a little wobbly because I got it on a not a great stand, but what I'm doing is just getting this kind of in here. What I've got to do is notch this out to where I think it's going to be to cut around this. And I'll bring it back. Okay, so there is that doghouse with the driver's side on it. Now what I did is angled it over kind of like at a 45-degree angle and did it. I've still got to put the top on it. As you can see, I don't have that top on it, so I'm going to put that top on over there, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I had a brain fart and thought I was had put it up there and thought I needed to cut it down around that thing. When I say that thing, that existing removable floor section, I thought I had to cut it around there. Well, I did have to cut it around there, but I don't know what the hell I was measuring. I measured way too much, and I've got a gap in there. There's a gap at the bottom over there too, of that straight part that comes over, but that was because that was how long the material was. I kind of misjudged that too, but I'll take care of that. I've got to put that top on. Let me go over to the other side. Maybe I'll take you into the engine bay and show you what it looks like with that on it too. Okay, there's a shot of it from the engine bay into it. So yeah, I've got a good clearance around that thing. I'll take you over and show you on the passenger side. And here's what it looks like from the passenger side. And again, I've got to get the top on that over by the driver's side, but I'll take care of that. One of the things that I'm doing is I've got that parking brake lever in there. I've just got it held in place with a C-clamp for right now. It's just kind of sitting there held in place, but I had just kind of finished working on and showing you that doghouse around there. Again, that thing can be finished out after the motor's removed, but before I remove the motor and transmission, I just want to get that parking brake kind of sat in there and get underneath the truck and figure out how I'm going to be able to attach that parking brake so that it can be functional. And I want to make the decision, the attachment decision, after with the motor and transmission still in place, so that I can be sure that any bracket that I have to make will not interfere with the engine or transmission or its removal. Well, I told you that I was going to take you under the truck, but you really can't see it from under the truck now. So I'm in the motor compartment, and here is the passenger side bell housing mount. And here is that brake lever support bracket. Now, the old one, when this lever was in the truck with the old engine and transmission, it was actually supported off of the transmission, this bracket. The bracket was attached to the side of the transmission, but I'm going to have to come up with a support some other way, and more than likely it's going to be off of the frame. Because of the close proximity of that bell housing and the engine right there. Originally I was kind of thinking about supporting it off of maybe the engine or the bell housing, but I'm not going to do that. I want to well, I'm not going to do that because, first of all, I don't want the thing really flexing back and forth a lot as you apply torque to the engine or transmission, and I'd rather keep it in a rigid location. I mean, it would be, I've got a couple of bolts here that apparently just held wire. I could probably run a bracket back there off of those bolts. But then again, I've got what looks to be either the heater, one of the heater supply line or return line right there, and I don't want to block that. Let me think about this for a little bit, and I'll work that out. Okay, so it's the next day from when I had left off about the shift lever and showing it to you, how I had clamped it in there just to set in there, and showing you how it was positioned from the engine compartment view. Well, I came back in here this morning and I started looking at it, how I was going to mount it there. And then I came back around here and started thinking, is that thing going to be in the way of my gauge and switch pod? And of course it is. It's going to be right in the way of it. So I'm back to looking at this thing. Let me just interject one other thing in here. Somebody that does this, restores vehicles or modifies vehicles or customizes vehicles, probably would have thought of that right away. Because they kind of have dealt with that before. I'm kind of in this really is a vehicle modification customization for the first time, and I don't have that benefit of having been there before, so thinking of those things right off the bat. So again, now what I've got to do is kind of rethink my strategy, and one of the things that I could do is probably move it back here farther. I just got to make sure that any cross struts that I might have to put across from frame rail to frame rail to hold that bracket doesn't interfere with the shifter or anything. But then I am also thinking, if I move it back here, is it going to be in the way of the passenger seat, or is the passenger seat going to be in the way of that if I shifted it back, once I get this passenger seat in here? So I'm kind of back to square one here. Logically, it's not going to work where it is, and I'm not really sure without getting some dimensions for the seats. If I moved it back, where will it be there? So I'm kind of back to square one on this brake thing. I really, really want to use that because it's kind of old school, indicative of this year of truck, and I kind of want to keep it in there. So let me rethink this thing, but I just wanted to let you know what was going on with it. Okay, in the intro to this segment, chapter 34, I told you that there was some major news regarding this build. And the video that I just left you off with was me coming in this morning and thinking about how that brake, parking brake lever was probably going to interfere with my control panel. So what I did was I shut the camera off and stepped away and took the camera over to download that video into the computer and started thinking, well, if I knew what the footprint of the seats were, how much room they took up, I could figure out maybe how far back I could shift that lever, or even if that lever was going to be in the same plane as the seat, it might kind of tuck in between the two seats. So I said to myself, why don't you go down to the salvage yard and see if they have any seats in there, or see if you can at least get some measurements off of the footprint of the seats to kind of figure out where they're going. And so that's what I decided to do. On the drive down there, I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, as long as I'm going down there, I might, you know, I've been talking about the steps, the battery boxes, and the steps in there, and that's another thing I'd like to see if they have any of them around there, just to get a general idea of what they're thinking about for costs on a salvage one, if they do have them. But that's one of the things that I would like to do, is get them battery boxes in there to kind of figure out where the main wiring out of the batteries are going to go, how the terminals are going to connect, how I'm going to run the alternator charge lead back to the batteries, both sets of batteries, how I'm going to put that diode or that auxiliary battery disconnect in there, where that's kind of going to go, just to get I'd like to have them boxes just so that I could have in the back of my mind what I'm working with and how I can arrange everything to fit in it. So let's continue on from here. I'll take you to another shot. I have talked about this salvage yard in other videos regarding this truck. Have told you, and for those of you that don't know, it's a huge truck salvage yard. That's all he deals with, is medium duty trucks. Now, I got a tour of the entire salvage yard today, and I really didn't realize how big it was. Stretches back from the road 1 mile, and all it is trucks. And there is a couple of pickup trucks in there, but probably the amount of pickup trucks in that salvage yard you could count on 2 hands. The rest of them are medium duty trucks on up. So I get there and I walk into it, and I've told you before, the guy that owns this place, Casey, his name is, it's called Casey's Truck Salvage. The guy is probably 80 years old, but as sharp as a tack, and he didn't never use the computer. When you walked into his service desk or the parts desk, all he uses is white pieces of paper, like 3x5 pieces of white blank paper and a pencil, and he writes down everything on those pieces of paper, no computer. And when you walked into that service desk area, it was in the form of an L shape. There were stacks of paper on there, probably 2 to 3 feet high, all around the L, until you got to his little part of the counter where he took phone calls and talked to people, and that was more neatly organized, and the stacks were probably only 6 to 12 inches high in front of them. But I walked in there today, and Casey was in the office talking to one of the girls, and there was a guy behind the desk that I had never seen before, and he was on the telephone talking to somebody, saying that they had been looking for a part and telling the guy's secretary that he couldn't locate that part, just to let him know and to have him call him back and let him, they maybe could work something else out. But the guy had an insignia on his shirt from someplace else, and all of the papers were gone. And there was a computer sitting where Casey normally stood or sat and talked to people. Casey comes out, and he recognized me, and we started talking about the truck. He wanted to know how the work that he had done on adapting the bell housing and everything went, and if I got into running, and I explained to him what I was doing is test fitting it in there to get the cab and everything else on, and I started talking about looking for seats and battery boxes, and then I also mentioned the parking brake thing about getting a parking brake that would adapt into the drive line. And he says, yeah, what I'll do is I'll call one of my guys out on the radio and have him take you around, and he can show you what we've got for battery boxes and a parking brake and seats and stuff. So he calls the guy on the radio, and he comes up and gets me, and Casey is kind of huddling with him in the background, telling him what I'm looking for, and the guy says, yeah, follow me, and I jump into a van with him, and he starts taking me through this thing, and I says to him, what's the deal with the papers being gone and the computer, and there was some other guy in there? And he says, I said, I just had this feeling. I said, did Casey sell this place? And he says, yeah. He did. And I was just shocked. I was kind of dumbfounded. And I says, has this been going on for a long time? Did you guys know about it? And he says, no, we didn't know about it. We were kind of blindsided one day. We came into work, and Casey just got us all together and told us that he had sold it. And I says, who bought this place? And he says, actually, it was 3 companies that bought it. 3 different companies formed a partnership to buy this place because there was so much there. And I said, you know, we were kind of talking about it, you know, what the changes were going to be. I says, is Casey staying on? And he says, yeah, he's going to be here for 2 or 3 or 4 months, and then he's going to transition himself out of it. And then it's going to be the new management. But I was kind of blindsided by this whole thing. So we go for a tour, and I had never been through this salvage yard all the way to the back. And he took me all the way to the back, and I was kind of dumbfounded. That's when I found out that it was mile deep. Of how much stuff that there was there. But we were looking for battery boxes, and he stopped at one truck and showed me a parking brake that was adapted to the pumpkin on the rear end. The parking brake adapts right onto here, but I'm not sure the parking brake that he showed me would adapt to this particular model of a rear end. When he showed me, the rear end looked smaller than this. But then again, I was out in the field and looking at the thing installed on a frame. I'm going to have to get back to him and find out if that will work. But anyways, we continued on and could not find a battery box. Well, we found a bunch of battery boxes, but they were only partial. Most of them were just the bottoms. The tops had all been salvaged out and sold to somebody. Apparently, a lot of people are looking for battery box tops. So the ones I'm looking for, as you know, are going to be the steps for the cab. So partway through the thing, I said to the guy, you know what I'm also looking for is I'm also looking for a sleeper. Now, I had talked to Casey before about the sleeper. He's got one right by his office that's sitting up on a cargo container, but somebody had stripped the interior out of it. They had wanted the interior out of it because apparently it was leather button tucked or something. But they had stripped the entire interior out. And I told him, I says, he says, well, you know what, I might have one. And he took me down to a place, And I had actually been looking at this on a previous visit to the salvage yard. And again, this one was also up on a Connex. And he says, I said, we need a ladder to get up there to look inside, but he says, I can tell you the damn thing is immaculate inside of it. It had a cloth over the opening that would go in between the cab and the sleeper so that it kept the weather out. But he says, I can tell you it's really immaculate inside. And I says, okay. And I says, well, I had asked Casey about it before, and he didn't know which one I was really talking about. So he says, well, let's go back up to the office and we'll talk about it. So on the way back to the office, I says, you know what? I was also looking for a front axle for the truck, and there was one that was up by the office before, and I had asked Casey about it, and Casey wasn't really sure which one I was talking about. He was going to check it out, but that was months before, and he probably forgot about it. And he says, well, let's ask him about that too. So we get back up to the office, and the guy tells him what a cab sleeper that I'm looking at. And I says to Casey, do you know which one we're talking about now? And he says, yeah, I do know which one. I says, well, how much you would think you want for it? And he says, $950. And I'm thinking, man, that's cheaper than, there's a big place out in Indiana, Iowa, that sells cabs and sleepers, and you can find ones that are really bad condition for around $800, where they've been in accidents and the shell is damaged or the interior is stripped out. But most of them are in the range of $1,500, and I would have to drive to Iowa, pick it up, and bring it back, and again, all you're seeing is pictures. I says, yeah, I think I could do that. I says, well, what about this axle? And he says, well, let me, I'll have the guy go out with you and take a look at it. And I says, well, one of the things that I need to know is because I'm having problems finding parts for all these various bastardized things that I'm putting on this truck. You go into an auto parts store and ask them for a part, and all they want to know is your make and model. And if you don't have your make and model, those people are so confused they have no idea. You wouldn't even know half the time that they worked in an auto parts store from their knowledge of any part other than what's on their computer hard drive. But anyways, we go out and looked at it, and the guy at first thought the axle I was talking about had air brakes on it, and I says, no, I'm positive they are hydraulic brakes. And so we went out and looked at it, and this is the guy that's going to be managing the place now for the new company after Casey leaves. And I said to him, okay, I kind of need to know what it's out of. And he says, I'm telling you, I'm not really sure, but here's the number on the back of the disc. So if you're looking for discs or pads or rotors or anything like that for it, all you got to do is give them this number and they can tell what series it is. So I says, cool, how much you want for it? And he says, nah, give me $750 for it and you can have it. Now it's got a couple of rims and bad tires on it, but I mean they're inflated, so they're not that bad, they're just worn. Not a lot of tread left on them. And I says, yeah, I can do that too. $750, I can do that. And the spacing works for the springs. Now the springs off of that axle are a lot wider than these springs, but I can make that adapt. But the center line of the springs where the axle goes from center to center is identical. The wheel spacing, on that axle from center line of tire to center line of tire is identical. So it will fit. I've got to redo the spring thing, make it shim up so these narrower springs fit into the bolt holes that are provided for the U-bolts on that existing axle, but I can do that, not a problem. The only big issue and thing that I'm going to have to be concerned about is the Pitman arm going from the steering box over to here is going to have to be modified and made probably to adapt the new axle to the existing steering box, but it's all doable. So I have a sleeper and I have a front axle for the truck. I'm going to be picking them up sometime the first part of next week from there. This place is huge, but the access off of the road is very limited. It's a very busy highway and it's very limited, and I would never be able to get my truck and trailer into it and be able to turn around up in there. It is so congested. So many trucks, so many parts piled all over the place that I'd never be able to do it. But there is kind of like, let's call it a landing strip, where I can pull in off of the road and probably back the trailer so that I can get turned around. And he said he would bring the parts out to me on a forklift and load them onto the trailer that way, so that I wouldn't have to worry about driving in and being able to get the trailer and truck turned around once you get in there. But big news, an axle and a sleeper for the truck. Two major things that I was always kind of concerned about, mainly that front axle, getting a front axle that would fit in there, that had disc brakes, and the 22.5 tires with the Bud rims. Got it. Got the sleeper. It'll all be coming, be shown to you next week. I'm actually going to throw some pics if I haven't already done so into this video. I had some actually old pictures of them from when I visited and saw those two things the first time, visited the salvage yard and saw those two things the first time. Today was a miserable day. It was raining, it was cold, and I didn't take a camera with me. I mean, I had my phone with me, but I didn't take a video camera with me to record anything because I didn't want to be outside. But anyways, news. An axle and a sleeper. You will see it next week.